stubble retention, reduced tillage and more cereals in the rotation, and suddenly we have problems that we haven't seen in the past. Taken a while to build up and a little bit longer for eye spot than for crown rot, but over time we've just built the inoculum levels up. One of the key things about all of these stubble-borne diseases in our farming systems is to actually know what level of risk you have in each paddock. Simple as that. If you don't know, you've got no chance of managing crown rot and eye spot. One way you can do it is go out and actually have a look in the paddock, and sometimes we do that and sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's the 100k look, and that doesn't work for stubble-borne diseases. So the other thing that you can do, you can actually go out and take a soil sample and send it off to Predict2B, and then you will know exactly what risk level you have in your paddock. And this is the absolute best way to do it, because you can look at inter-row, you can look after a break from cereal. And the only thing I would suggest to you is do what I do, which is get somebody else to do your soil sampling for you, because it is horrible. But it is definitely well worth the effort with all of these diseases, because they're quite cryptic very often, and I don't know about you, but unless you're looking at things all the time, you'll find that they're really hard to identify. And Blake, who's probably not listening, will agree with me that trying to work out whether it's eye spot or crown rot is extremely difficult in some instances. So, crown rot. Now, these photos are from the Upper North Farming Systems group, who are part of this stubbles sort of thing. I haven't worked with Leader EPAF directly for looking at crown rot, but I have worked with the Upper North Farming Systems group. Two things surprised me when I was working with this group. The first one was that most of them had no idea that they really had a quite widespread problem with crown rot. So that was interesting to start with, and I felt as though I could provide them with a lot of really good local information, because I was working with them to look in their paddocks at what sort of a problem they had, both on row, inter row, in paddocks with stubble and without stubble. But then they showed me in this photo that there are things that you see differently when somebody provides you literally with a different perspective on a paddock. And in this paddock, those white patches in that paddock are whiteheads from crown rot. Normally I would say to you, scattered whiteheads in a paddock. It's quite clear that in this instance they're in patches. That's a wheat crop in the foreground. The other thing I learnt from this photo was not only can you get whiteheads in barley, but they will also show up in patches. The green crop in the background that runs back from the brighter green crop in the background that runs back from that wheat crop also has whitehead patches in it. I have been out into those paddocks. Those whiteheads are due to crown rot. So what I'm saying is that for diseases, don't take it for granted. They can always surprise you. Crown rot, along with eye spot, are at the or show most symptoms at the base of the plant, and you need to pull the leaf sheaths away. For crown rot, it's that browning, and even for both of these diseases, even when there's no lodging or whiteheads or anything else showing, if you've got basal stem symptoms of those diseases, you will have some yield loss. And do you have crown rot on Eyre Peninsula? Absolutely. It loves Eyre Peninsula. Now, what this slide quite clearly demonstrates, and it's something that you always need to remember, is that for crown rot, the environment, so in other words, spring rainfall in particular, but also during autumn, how much moisture there is around for infection. So, but that spring rainfall is going to determine very much exactly how much yield loss you have. And it's a bit scary when you have a look at all those other things that you might consider doing. None of them come anywhere near that environmental thing. Frustrates the hell out of me. I can't just say, do this and it will go away. It just doesn't happen. Crown rot still provides us with many headaches. I would guess that there will be paddocks out there that have a problem and you don't actually know about it. And the reason is that this particular disease, the inoculum's most concentrated right in the bottom of the plant, and then going up the plant, even though the concentrations decrease, there's definitely still inoculum present further up the plant. New crop comes up, touches that gets infected. Now, when you understand that the concentration is greatest in the base of the plant, as you might imagine, burning really doesn't do terribly much. That's the Pinery bushfire, and that was one of the hottest burns I have ever seen. And this base of this particular plant in this paddock was partially protected by soil and did not burn. There was hardly any difference between the levels of crown rot on the unburnt side and the burnt side of that particular fire. And I defy you to get a hotter burn than that in any of your paddocks. So burning is definitely not a short-term fix for crown rot. It's a medium to long-term fix, and it's not something that you would actually want to become involved in, I don't think, too greatly. Cutting for hay can help a little bit as well, just as burning does, but again, not a short-term fix and not really very effective. I thought you might be interested to know that sowing on the interrow actually can help. Not very much, but it does help, particularly for durum. And I adjure you to look at that right-hand side photo. That was the end of a 4-year rotation trial looking at on-row, between-row and peas and all the rest of it. Peas in the paddock, sheep camped on it. I came back, went, oh no, and Jack will remember this one very well because he saved the day. We did our actual sampling after sowing because Jack could actually go back with 2.5 centimetre accuracy, pick up exact plots. And there definitely was still crown rot present in those plots, and you could tell the difference in levels between the row and on the row. So, future, I've been working on it for a long time. I still see no simple fix. However, there are a few things. One is about the effects of disease combinations. I think crown rot is causing more yield loss problems where, say for instance, there's root lesion nematode present. I would like to quantify that. I'd also like to have a little bit of a look at mechanisms as well. We still don't quite understand why yield loss occurs from crown rot. And so what I would really like to do is to raise awareness to ensure that everybody is aware that this can be a problem and knows how to identify whether or not they have a problem. And I'd also like you to consider timely reminders. 4 years of good seasonal conditions, no crown rot seen at all. People forget about it. I mean, think about what we were talking about all day today. How many different things have you guys got to think about? 3 or 4 years without seeing crown rot or something or another else in your paddock tends to fall by the wayside and you forget about it. So timely reminders, I don't know how we do that. I'd be interested to hear what you have to say on that. Now, moving right along to eye spot, I have a lot of information about eye spot management. I haven't put any of the actual data up here. If you want to know details, please get in touch afterwards. The main thing again with eye spot is to be aware. And one of the things that I've heard on a number of occasions is, oh well, it's just the sheep got into the paddock, the cows got into the paddock, the kangaroos were bad in the top paddock this year. But when you go out and have a look at these stems, they tend to fall in a range of different directions, and when you look at the bases, what you will see is you will see little eye-shaped lesions, as the name implies. Usually up to about the second node, usually only about this high off the ground. Unlike eye spot, this one is rain splashed up on, the spores are rain splashed up onto the base of the stems. And then you can get lodging. Now, even without lodging, you will still get yield loss from eye spot if there are lesions present. And as you can see, this is a South Australian problem. It is also a problem on Eyre Peninsula. I think Blake can agree with me that it is a problem on Eyre Peninsula. So, what do you do for management? Rotation, fungicides, varietal resistance, burning infected stubble. Well, rotation you need 2 years out. Nobody's going to do that. 1 year will reduce it. I'm looking at how do you actually then manage to get a reduction in that second year as well, while still keeping cereals in the rotation at every second year. Fungicides, none are registered at present, hopefully very soon. We do understand how they work and can tell you what might happen if you do certain things. we're still looking at that in terms of timing and efficacy to a certain extent. Varietal resistance, we do have some, but it is limited. And burning, yes, it definitely will help. Again, this is the pinery bushfire. Taking samples on the unburnt side, you've got higher levels than on the burnt side, but there is still a significant level of eye spot inoculum left on that burnt side. Now, I've put up some research priorities here. I'd be interested if any of you have any comments about these. I was lucky enough to be asked to talk at the Minlaton local focus for GRDC, and very lucky to be able to do an interactive session. And there were tables of people, and I got the tables of people, 10 of them, to write their lists, do their voting, and then I've summarised it for you on this slide. The top grouping were the ones that came out with pretty well every table saying that that was where their priority would lie, and then the groupings below of less and less importance. A number of these things we've started to address already, but it has given me some really good information about where to put that research investment. And so I'd be very interested to know, for those of you who have eye spot in your clients' paddocks, whether or not these jibe with what you're actually thinking of. How many of you remember the white grain disorder debacle? Yeah, crazy, man. Okay, 2010-11. The whole point was that suddenly there was a sample somewhere out there that went into the silo. Somebody went, gee, there's a lot of white stuff in there. Somebody went, oh no, Fusarium head blight, which produces toxins that are harmful to both stock and humans. And so everybody went, we're not sending it out, or our export markets will have a heart attack. They'll either reject it and not ever take grain from us again, or they will say, we'll take it, but we'll take it at a reduced dollar value. What are the symptoms? Well, basically, you're never going to find it. Your clients will never find it. You'll never find it. I never found it. And the symptoms in green crop are almost non-existent. It's once you've harvested the grain, and this was where the problem arose. And all in those years, the grain that was worst affected was harvested last. There was no opportunity to shandy because all the good stuff had already gone into the silo. Now, and Eyre Peninsula ended up with a lot of the grain that was affected came from Eyre Peninsula. Very low levels of infection, comparatively speaking. When we talk about other diseases, we get worried about yield loss. This one really doesn't cause yield loss. The infected grain or affected grain will actually not germinate. Yeah, what can I say? Is it widely distributed? Yes, it's all around Australia now, we know fairly well. It's out there in your paddocks, and it is one of the things that is on the Predictor B test results, and keep an eye on it if you do Predictor B, because one of the ways that I would be looking at keeping you informed about what's going on is by putting out an alert in CropWatch in a season where I thought there might be a problem. And then you would just look at the paddocks where you know you have high inoculum levels. We have had a look at a whole range of different things. We know a little bit about all of those things in the top part there, but not a huge amount about any of them. Now, we have not seen this in the paddock since 2010-11, although I would have expected to see something happening in 2016. So the big unknown is exactly when this problem might crop up again down here, if it does at all. I do all of the stuff that's down around the stems and round some into the root systems. Hugh Warwork does the stuff that's on the leaves, way up high in the air, the one that you all apply, ones that you usually apply fungicides for. And he informs me that for net form net blotch and for spot form net blotch, what farming system you've got doesn't matter too much, stubble retention or otherwise. The spores blow around so much in the air that what you've got in your individual paddock is not really that important. It's coming in from all over the place, just as septoria spores tend to come in from all over the place. Handy to know, but not particularly useful. However, For yellow leaf spot, there may be some advantage to actually understanding what level of risk you have in your paddocks, and that particular test is now about to come on to the Predictor B test as well. And if you do Predictor B, it is worth having a look at that, because what happens is those little black fruiting bodies, when you run your fingers along, once there's been enough rain to get the fruiting bodies to occur, and you run your fingers along that stem, it will feel like sandpaper. And it'll have little black things on it, but it will also feel like sandpaper. Most of the other little black things that happen on stubble are very smooth, and you won't feel them when you run your fingers along them. And the rain splash from that of spores up onto the young plants will infect them, and I'm sure you've all seen the yellowing that occurs from yellow leaf spot. Most common, it needs 6 hours of leaf wetness for those spores to germinate. So it's those misty mornings early in the season. Usually we don't see, because the seasonal conditions are very dry at the end of the season, we don't see it get into the mature plants, and that's when you usually see yield loss from it. However, there's another form of spore that is born on the wind from out of those mature plants. Hey, that's life. The stuff that's on the stubble, if you know you've got a lot of it sitting there, then you definitely need to be considering using a more resistant variety. And there's plenty of info about resistance of varieties. Because you really, as everybody's been saying during this day, you need to get your young plants up and growing strong and healthy to get a good result at the end of the year. This is the take-all that everybody's been talking about. This one is also likely to come and bite you on the behind, like what happened at Cleve, because it's not quite the same as crown rot and eye spot in that it does have some of the inoculum is actually in the bottom of the plant, so in the stubble. A lot of it's in the root system. It can build up quite quickly over 12 months, and then if you get the right conditions the following year, then you can see yield loss in a subsequent cereal. Now, mostly we don't realise it's actually built up, and a lot of people will never have seen take-all now, or if they have seen it, it will be a very long time ago. So again, this is about keeping an eye on your Predictor B results, and it's about being aware of what the symptoms look like, so you can say, I've got it this year, I need to be careful about what's going on next year. And again, I put up that timely reminders needed for all diseases, because once they haven't been around for a while, we tend to forget.